Welcome in to the Rock Talk Studio, the podcast that answers the question, is this rock and roll book or documentary worth your time and money? And today, the spotlight falls on the book Soul Serenade, King Curtis and His Immortal Saxophone, which I'll review, rate, and determine if this book is for you. And then, as always, I'll leave you with all the book buzz and documentary news you don't want to miss out on, including projects by the Beach Boys, Mama Cass, Joe Cocker, Leon Russell, and the Tedeschi Trucks Band. I'm your host, Big Rick. Join me for an exclusive look into what's hitting the shelves and screens, and get ready to rock your reading and viewing list. Who is the greatest saxophone player in rock and roll? I mean, off the top of my head, I immediately go to Clarence Clemons. At least he might be the most popular. His work with the E Street Band turned him into Springsteen's foil, and his standout solos every night were sometimes the highlight of Bruce's live shows. And maybe the most recognizable solos other than Clemons, I would have to say belong to Bobby Keys. Keys played with the Stones for over 40 years. Just a few off the top of my head: Brown Sugar, Rip This Joint, Can't You Hear Me Knockin'? Those are classic solos. But thanks to this new book, Soul Serenade, King Curtis and His Immortal Saxophone by Timothy Hoover, I learned that Curtis might have more rock and roll lineage than both Clemons and Keys. King Curtis might also have been one of the first rock and roll records I ever heard. He got his first big hit blowing a different, for the time, saxophone solo on the 1958 hit Yakety Yak. I wasn't born in 1958, but years later, when my mom had a bunch of 45s that I started getting into, I played this song all the time in the house, and it was kind of cool to look back now and have this book fill in the missing pieces on who was behind the playing of that song. Curtis was one of those who just knew very young that he wanted to play music. In high school, he crowned himself King Curtis and started playing clubs around town. The book does a great job of laying out the early years of his career and setting the stage for his brave, pretty much roll of the dice move to New York City to become a star. Early on, his career was filled with him playing predominantly R&B and soul and jazz, though his time spent working with the rock and roll world produced some really interesting and legendary pairings. The author, Timothy Hoover, worked on this book for 20 years. It's a passion project for sure, and one that comes across in the read. You can definitely feel it in the pages. Hoover makes it a point to show how appreciated King Curtis was to almost everyone who ever worked with him. The book really lays out how talented King Curtis was. It's deeply researched and provides a ton of testimonials to Curtis's talent. And even though I felt the strong appreciation that Hoover gets across in telling the story, he doesn't go too far and make you feel like you're just reading a love letter to Curtis. What he does, and he does this well, is he lays out how influential King Curtis was. Curtis opened for the Beatles when they played Shea Stadium. That's some great trivia, and really a huge tell of how big a talent he was during that time. He also went on to be the opening act on the rest of those Beatles shows in America on that tour, and then became friends with the Beatles, even playing on a John Lennon track years later. He also worked with Buddy Holly. Jimi Hendrix was a guitar player in Curtis's band, Hendrix. And my favorite rock and roll collaboration of all was Doyle Bramall of Delaney and Bonnie fame and the Skydog himself, Duane Allman. The book does a great job detailing their friendship and has a bunch of really cool examples of what they loved to do best when they had a chance to hang out, which was just play music. They even stayed in each other's houses a lot. Really cool interaction between those three. So weaved into this tale of easily the most wanted and respected band leader and saxophone player of his time was his life story that, because the author talked to so many people who played big parts in his life, you get a deep introspective look at the type of person Curtis was. And like I mentioned before, you see a lot of adulation for this incredible talent, but props again to the author. He also makes sure you understand his challenges, especially with gambling and, unfortunately, his temper. The writing makes sure to round out Curtis as not only this immense talent, but also this really engaging personality that would anytime he came in, light up a room. He just had a special way with encouraging other players also. And he had a way of just getting the best out of people he played with. Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke, Donny Hathaway, Freddie King, Wilson Pickett, and Otis Redding are just a few of the names added to the list of who he played with. And I mean, there was a time where Aretha Franklin wouldn't even tour unless Curtis was her band leader. When I was sent the book, I didn't think it really qualified for what I do on the podcast, and I had to really think about reading it for the show. Rock and roll is what I talk about. Is this book really about a rock and roller? Well, I'm really glad I didn't pass on this one. It's a great look at a truly underappreciated talent. I admit it, I did not know the extent of King Curtis's talent, and I love it when I can read a book and broaden that rock and roll knowledge. Author Timothy Hoover's 20-year investment in this story really paid off. It's a great book. How great is this book? Well, let's stamp the official Rock Talk Studio rating on it. Let's have that have the final say, and let's see how great this book really is. Okay, let's stamp the official Rock Talk Studio rating on Soul Serenade, King Curtis and his Immortal Saxophone. Here's how the rating system is set up. It's 1 through 4. A 1 is a front row center. This is a not to be missed. This is an instant classic. This doesn't come around a lot. You can't miss this one. That's a front row center. A 2 is a floor seat. This is a highly recommended project. Don't miss. Definitely check it out. A 3 is a loge seat, which is not bad. Could be good. Could be okay. Could be you might want to pass. And 4 is where you don't want to be. That's the nosebleeds, baby. Soul Serenade gets a 2. It's a floor seat. This is a do not miss book. I cannot believe how much I learned from this book. I loved filling in all these little missing pieces in my rock and roll knowledge. And I found a new appreciation for a guy's music that I've heard my whole life, but never really knew it was him playing all these great songs with all these great rock and roll artists. Soul Serenade, King Curtis and His Immortal Saxophone by Timothy Hoover is a great book. Go out and get it. This title is not to be missed. I've got a bunch more book and documentary reviews and recommendations for you, and that is in the archives of the show. A year and a half now of a ton of books and documentaries. I've got recently talking about a really great book called Drums and Demons about Jim Gordon. I really highly recommend everybody go check that out. You can find that in episodes, 2 episodes back. I just reviewed the Geddy Lee book. There's a book about 20 female badasses in rock and roll talking about feminism. That's a very unique and a great book. So dig back into the archives. You can check out a lot of great stuff and a lot of great recommendations. I've also got another really good recommendation for a podcast. And the podcast is called The Blues Guitar Show. It's a show by Ben Martin, who is a great guitar player and has taught me a lot. I love this show. You've got teaching about guitars. You've got talk about guitars, focusing on blues guitar, but also rock stuff too. There's recording tips. There's theory tips. There's gear tips. There's interviews. A really cool show about learning and about just guitar in general. Here's a trailer from the show. Let's take a listen.
Hey everybody, Ben from the Blues Guitar Show podcast here. Are you a frustrated guitarist wishing you could play great songs and awesome sounding solos but just don't know where to start? I'm on a mission to get you into the nitty-gritty of playing blues, rock and country guitar. The Blues Guitar Show podcast comes out every Monday with a new guitar lesson. Some weeks we cover a classic song, sometimes a riff, sometimes a solo or theory concept, always with the mind of playing great music with great people. I've had everyone on the show from heavy hitters like The Who to rockabilly legends, all giving advice and demos to help you on your guitar playing journey. Check out the Blues Guitar Show podcast today, anywhere that you find podcasts. See you there.
That's Ben and his great podcast, The Blues Guitar Show. Head on over to any of your directories where you get your podcast and check it out. Here comes all the juicy book buzz and documentary news that I dug around and found. You don't have to search around trying to see what's coming out, what to look forward to. I got you covered with that, with a bunch of titles this week. Let's start with a new book that just came out called Mama Cass. My Mama Cass is a memoir, and it's out now. And it comes with a kind of a cool little twist because the book was written by Cass's daughter, Owen Elliott Kugel, who was 7 years old when her mom passed away. Man, it's been almost 50 years since Mama Cass passed. She was only 32 when she died. 275 pages, gives an inside look at all that Laurel Canyon sound. The mystery behind her death finally gets the family's truth about it. That's what this book is being touted for. There's a lot that goes into that story. It's a new book, My Mama Cass, the memoir. It's out now. Another book that just came out was a new book about the Beach Boys, and it is their only official book about the band. Press releases talk about Brian Wilson, Mike Love, Alex Jardine, and Bruce Johnson together, providing a combined career narrative, especially for this book, and through meticulous compilation from sources worldwide, Carl Wilson and Dennis Wilson words are equally represented. It's presented in a kind of coffee table type presentation, that kind of book, a ton of pictures, a ton of extras. It looks really, really nice. It just came out, and it kind of serves as an accompany piece to the new Beach Boys documentary that also just came out. The doc is currently streaming on the Disney Channel. I keep saying I'm going to watch it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Beach Boys fans, you got a new book, Beach Boys by the Beach Boys, and a new documentary, The Beach Boys. A lot of great stuff for Beach Boys fans. This next documentary, man, this is one of the most interesting marketing of a documentary I think I've ever seen. And for those taking flights right now who are flying on Delta Airlines, you'll get a chance to see what I mean, because you get to see this new documentary that's out called Learning to Live Together, The Return of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Virgin Atlantic will start running the movie on June 24th. So Delta Airlines, Atlantic Airlines is showing this great documentary. It'll also be added to the Criterion channel starting July 1st. This doc came out a couple of years ago in selected theaters, and I was lucky enough to get a chance to see it, and then it just vanished. And I would say this is one of the projects that people ask me about the most if I know anything about when it's coming out. And it's really great to see that it finally got picked up and found its way to distribution through the Criterion channel. The documentary is a retelling of Joe Cocker's Mad Dog and Englishman tour that had that massive 30-piece band with him. It captures the reunion of the 12 remaining members 45 years later, performing with the Tedeschi Trucks Band at the Lock-In Festival. The film blends archival footage with contemporary interviews and performances with Leon Russell, Derek Trucks, Susan Tedeschi, Rita Coolidge, Chris Robinson's in there, Jim Kelter, Dave Mason, Claudia Lanier. Very, very cool. Steve Earle's in there and more. This was something that the Tedeschi Trucks Band wanted to do and really went out of their way to accommodate Leon Russell. It's one of Leon Russell's, towards the end of his life, performances. I cannot wait to see this. I will definitely be doing a review and rating on this one. Learning to Live Together, The Return of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Thanks for tuning in. Love talking rock and roll and getting a chance to recommend a few titles for you. I hope you found a few things that you might be interested in checking out. Just because the episode is over does not mean the conversation is. You can join me on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube for more book and doc talk. All right, tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road. I'll see you next time in the Rock Talk studio.